I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I like my Zelda games to be pretty linear. There's something I find very enjoyable or nostalgic about being given a story and then opening the doors in front of me to see where that story takes me. I love being introduced to new plot elements and different but relevant characters and then taking those characters on a journey with me as the plot unfolds. On the other hand, I love having my freedom to choose, to go where I want to go, and to most importantly, kill time, not just monsters. Age of Calamity is a game that really pulls me in multiple directions in terms of the things I want in a Zelda game. Now I know some of y'all will say, it's not a real Zelda game, and then argue over whether Nintendo directly calls it canon or not, or that it doesn't fit in the timeline, which already splits into parallel universes every time a game doesn't fit. But I'm not here to argue about all that. I'm here to alienate myself in a different way, and that's by comparing a game that Zelda fans like to bitch about to a game that they're on their knees for 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. This is my feelings on Age of Calamity in comparison to my previous most recent play and new installment, Breath of the Wild.
Fuck it up! Fuck it up!
When we think about Zelda games, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it the particular map of any given game? Is it the technicalities of the Zelda universe and the debating that surrounds them? Is it the specific rules that fans believe everything in the Zeldaverse should follow, as they desperately hope for Nintendo to recreate the only good part of their pathetic childhood? Well, maybe for you, but for me, I always immediately think of things that actually make Zelda, well, Zelda. I think about things like the Triforce, detailed quests and missions, multiple objectives, the Sheikahs, cool-ass weapons with their own unique applications and mechanics. I think of Hyrule as a kingdom with a king, an army, a castle, and of course a hero who rises up to save the kingdom. I think of the land of Hyrule as a whole, not on a game-by-game changing basis, but as a unique world that can be presented to me in many different ways while always still being itself. Lore is an important thing in a game, so much so that a game can suck ass and people will still play it just to say they did, as long as it feels like it's in the world that they love. With good lore, a mediocre game can still be special to hardcore and obsessed fans, so how much more so when the game is actually good? If I say I like Age of Calamity, I'm not just saying that because it's Zelda, but I actually like the game. Just so there's no confusion, I really like Breath of the Wild too. I previously made a what I think it needs video where I still kissed its ass the whole time because I just really enjoyed playing the game. But there are many things that I think would make me like it more, and I've honestly found most of that fulfillment in an unlikely place. Now I see a lot of people cry about Age of Calamity and say they don't like it because it's not a real or traditional Zelda game, and I really just want to know why. When I think of the things that I like in Zelda games, all those things I mentioned, Age of Calamity is a completely different version of a Zelda game that still hits these marks for me, even more so than Breath of the Wild. Yes, Breath of the Wild plays like a Zelda game in the open world sense, and when you press buttons on the controller, but it doesn't seem to have nearly as much Zelda feel as I'd expect. And while we're on pushing buttons, let's look at the gameplay for starters. Here's where Hyrule Warriors really separates itself and falls into the realm of not real Zelda. It's not the singular person exploration adventure game that Zelda games are. It plays like a battlefield RPG. Age of Calamity is referred to as hack and slash. You can really just button mash like crazy to kill as many minor enemies as you can, and any given swing of your weapon will hit as many characters as are around you, sometimes hacking up 10 or more enemies at once, just spamming one button. There's no Link's house or running from place to place, no fetch quests, no traveling across Hyrule Field to get from standard volcano place to standard water place. There's a map with scenarios, and as you progress through the story, you unlock the next stage, jump to it, play it, and then move to the next by clicking it from the main map. All those standard places are there, but they're there in a logical way and feel very connected to the story as you go to them. Each scenario you can go back to as many times as you want to replay, cutscenes and all, and there's side quests, aka smaller stages. You can try to get higher scores on each stage, if you care about that kind of thing. Go back to find missed treasure, or just go back to mine materials, which would be your most common motivation. You can play with different characters, build up character levels for your favorites, or buy them up for the ones you never play, and many other untraditional things. The point is, it's not a typical Zelda adventure. Or is it? I honestly find it satisfying in the same way as any other Zelda game. In a classic Zelda game, you'll play through different levels or dungeons, meet new story characters, and through that adventure, you'll get new items, gameplay mechanics, and so on. Here you basically do the same thing, except instead of caves and ruins, the levels are actual open areas on the map where battles are taking place. You do meet tons of new characters, but here they're as useful as they've ever been in a Zelda game, and they actually fight with you for once instead of just claiming they are. This, not being a regular adventure title, doesn't have you finding new weapons and items with unique fighting styles, but where Breath of the Wild failed with its fighting diversity through like 40 different weapons that fight the same, Age of Calamity gives you a ton of different characters with different fighting styles, combos, special attacks, and so on. I've seen multiple idiots talk trash about it and say you just spam kill hordes of monsters at once, which, yeah, that's a big part of it, but it's deeper than that. Most of my killing hundreds of enemies in minutes is for charging my special attack, which is kind of broken after getting the carrot stew, or farming monster parts, but you absolutely cannot fight most bosses that way. They take strategy and waiting for your opening, especially playing on hard where even weaklings take half of your health in one hit. Interestingly enough, this is the reverse of Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, with the exception of Guardians and Lynels, it seemed like I had to plan better to kill random low-level overworld monsters, while the bosses I literally just hacked and slashed until they were dead. I feel like if that game's Link actually had more interesting weapons, maybe it'd help, but really, what's the need when your sword will do all the work? But in Age of Calamity, I have to actually pick and plan my attacks, wait for openings, and in many cases plan out my fighter and which weapon seals to utilize for a map. Just like picking your favorite weapon and kicking ass with it, this game lets you pick your favorite fighter and kick ass with them. The more you play the game, the more unlockables pop up on the map for you to address with each character, and as you fulfill these, you gain new abilities. Now, I'm not even good at gaming and even worse at combos, but I can't see an actual good loyal Zelda gamer looking at the fight system in this and complaining that it's repetitive, yet this is what I've seen people say on multiple threads. People say the fighting is boring and repetitive and inferior to Breath of the Wild, but is it really? Breath of the Wild has like 20 bows that shoot about the same way, minus a couple arrow changes, a variety of shields for no reason other than to dress different and surf on, and then the hand weapons I already mentioned. There's some variation, but it's mainly the aesthetic that changes. Maybe in Age of Calamity they get tired of it quickly because there's actually a lot of enemies to fight this time. Most of your combos in this game come from clicking the same two buttons, sure, it's just a matter of how many times you click to determine what combo you'll get. Maxing out a character will give you like 8 or more different combos just from the 2 main action buttons, and then on top of that, you get character-specific unique actions and special attacks. You have 4 Sheikah Slate runes that are different with each character, and also 3 elemental rods. Now sure, you can spam the same buttons all day if that's what you like, but I've had some battles on this game that were actually difficult and required me to think strategically with how I attack and combo. I thank God that it's not a Mortal Kombat combo game where I have to put in a button configuration that feels like a GTA cheat code just to make my character give a 2-piece with a kick. It doesn't need to be that complicated. This shit takes place in a war and it plays like a war. If I'm out there busting heads, I'm not looking to think harder than I need to about my attacks. But I find this ability to pick which combo I want from which character I want very fulfilling, and something about diving into a cluster of low-level enemies with a strong attack, it's like ASMR to me. I can also switch characters mid-battle to even kill an enemy I'm fighting with who I want if I'm that pressed or petty. And yes, I've ran characters to a different part of the map completely just to finish a challenge with the character I like. Sure, it doesn't have me riding a horse shooting arrows or strategically placing bombs in various places to solve puzzles, but I can't explain the satisfaction of hearing the shield break when I throw a barrage of bombs at a strong enemy. The action is reasonably fast-paced with a blend of good strategy versus just going ham on multiple enemies, and between the number of characters to pick from, I doubt you'll get bored with what you're doing for a long time. But looking beyond that, it's not all just beat 'em up. I mean, the gameplay is, yeah. Basically just go here, beat the shit out of someone here, then do the same over there, and beat the dog shit out of every lackey in between A and B. But all the action is driven by a surprisingly interesting story. I have a big gripe about Breath of the Wild, and strangely this is a complaint I hear from everybody, yet the world still gets on their knees ready to give deeds at the mere mention of that game. Isn't a good story not a fundamental of a good game? The very first Zelda game was like the test, and every game after that kinda added more and more story, and that made the games more and more interesting for the most part in my book. I get that Breath of the Wild goes back to the sandbox, and that's really fun, but damn, even Zelda 1 had you get the Triforce pieces. Breath of the Wild is literally like, learn how your controller works and then go fight the main boss if you want. The story is basically this. Hey buddy, so like, all your friends are dead and you already forgot them, but you'll remember them. But after you remember them, you still won't care, cause who even are these creatures? And no, I don't wanna fuck a fish. But actually, you're dead too, but you're back. And I think Zelda's dead, at least her father is. Oh, but Impa is kicking still. Although she's so old, she's basically melted to her seat. So, go talk to her. Or just go straight to Ganon and fight the main enemy. Your choice. There's almost nothing to the story. Like literally, you don't even need to know it. You can get your exposition in 5 minutes from King Rome's Force Ghost and call it a day.
Can I hear it again? Do you have time?
Yeah, yes.
I think that meshes well in a post-apocalyptic world where you have amnesia, but I really had to put my foot in it to care about what the memories were telling me. You don't even have to obtain the Triforce in this game. It's already there, doing nothing. Now, Kakariko Village is good visual storytelling, I think, and that area does good to represent the connection between the village and the Sheikah, but damn if the Sheikah don't actually do anything in this game. They're basically normal Hylian villagers with white hair. They may as well have left them in hiding and had the villagers be randoms, like other versions of this town. Even Impa is so damn old, if she tries to disappear with a Deku nut like in previous games, she might accidentally respawn in a grave hole. I know the game isn't based around them actually doing anything, but why put them all there, express that they're master sword fighters, and then have no actual use for them other than to look cool? Breath of the Wild does have the Master Sword, and the way it's given is pretty fun, but by the time I found it, I'd already broken so many overpowered swords, I felt like I could find them everywhere. But it did really kick ass against Guardians, and it was nice that it wouldn't completely break, I guess. Now, Age of Calamity has all the Triforce use and Sheikah shit you could ask for in a Zelda game. Zelda's Triforce is more useful than I've ever seen it before, and it feels like she's actually worthy for once, instead of getting it because, she's like the princess and stuff, so she's like wise and junk. Nah, she's actually kicking ass and isn't just a more realistic looking Princess Peach. And when her power awakens, she's even more kick-ass and uses her Triforce to blow more shit away. Impa is young and sprawl in this game, and to be honest, she's one of my favorite parts of the game. If I wanted to see what those Kakariko losers could really do, I sure saw it here. She's actually a one-man army, or woman. In this game, the Sheikah actually feel like someone useful and important here, fighting, serving the royal family, instead of just a fading memory hiding in secrecy. And that I can say for all the different races of Hyrule. All the regions are so much more interconnected in this game. Seeing Gorons or Zoras fighting in Hyrule, or an actual Hyrule army fighting alongside them, makes this universe feel more alive than I've ever seen it. How can someone outright refuse to play the game with that going on? Because, what, time-traveling robot? To be mad about that in a game centered around time-traveling heroes is just stupid as fuck. I sit and watch people argue over the official Nintendo timeline, which is made of multiple universes created from time travel, but then turn and say this game is stupid because its universe is created from time travel, and that they just won't even play the game because of it.
At sealing the Calamity.
But we must address the gravity of there being another guardian reason.
But where the official timeline split uses time travel alternate universes to shut up annoying fans, Age of Calamity uses time travel to create a prequel that is actually a better story than the original. It takes characters that were dead and close to irrelevant in Breath of the Wild and gives them attention and usefulness. Bringing the future champions back in time was a bit unnecessary, but I enjoyed seeing their interactions with the past heroes that they admire, and that's a part of the game that would have far less impact if I hadn't played Breath of the Wild first, because I'd be like, who the hell is Tiba? But it doesn't stop there. We also get to see the divine beasts actually used for something instead of nothing. Like seriously, all the padding in Breath of the Wild is to free the divine beasts just so they can walk a half a mile and stand, then shoot one bullet at the very end, which isn't even the final blow. We get much more worthwhile interaction with the Yiga clan. In Breath of the Wild, they stalk you the whole game, and by the time you get to their hideout, which is a pretty fun part of the game, the boss is a useless dork, and you don't even know why they exist after it's over. You just stand here staring at this giant asshole in the ground, wondering why you did it all. In Age of Calamity, they're here, and Koga is still a dork, but he gets a lot more attention, plus the introduction of Suga to counterbalance him and create one of my favorite duos of all time. He's such a badass, but even without him, Koga can still prove himself. Then they also interact with the seer, who, yeah, wasn't really explained very well, but created a really good dynamic between the three of them. But at least in this game, the seer exists as more than just a piece of exposition. Oh, did I mention this game actually has the king and he's actually doing stuff? He has some really good, heroic, sad, also just badass moments, and he's a dope fighter, which gives him more credibility than ever versus previous games where he's always been a background figure while his kingdom gets taken over and then saved by a random farm boy. He's actually leading his kingdom and jumping into the fight himself. Is it sinful for me to say I like a lot of this more than Breath of the Wild, and in some cases more than traditional Zelda formula? The time-traveling guardian came out of nowhere to set up the story, but are we going to act like that's less creative than saying Hyrule dug up ancient tech because a fortune teller said Ganon is returning for the 100th time? I got such close and personal story-driven character interactions in this game that I wish there was an open-world version of it to play in because the world seems so much more alive and interesting than in Breath of the Wild. I got to enjoy Impa actually being a total badass instead of just standing like a statue or being older than actual dirt, and Zelda not being useless like she is in almost every other game. I got to beat lizard heads in as Daruk, electrocute the shit out of shit as Urbosa, shoot moblins in the dick as Rivali, and oh my god, Mipha in this game? Her fighting moves go harder than Uku's titty nipples. In Breath of the Wild, I used to wonder why they picked this little stain to pilot the divine beast. Like, why didn't they pick King Zora? That asshole picked up a whole guardian with his own hands and yeeted it off the mountain. But in this game, Mipha is the shit, and this story should be canon just to give her more credibility in Breath of the Wild. This game gives all the champions credibility as well, and even when they're a total dickwad, I don't question why they were picked. I get to see early interactions of these characters that exist in the world of Breath of the Wild, but I like them enough where I want them to actually survive and win this time, versus when I didn't care if they were dead. In this game, Zelda gets her sealing power without having to blood sacrifice Link for it, and then the four champions are able to overcome their Blight Ganons and take back their divine beasts instead of dying like pussies like they did in the other game. The Blight Ganons are actually pretty challenging to fight in this game as well, and it was a real race against the clock to get to the champions and help them before they ran out of strength. And once the time came to fight with them, it actually makes sense that they were losing because these Blights actually feel like real bosses, and it's eternally more satisfying to beat them and save the champions this time around than it was to avenge the champions and be like, damn, they must have been weak as hell.
You're weak! Weak!
At some points in the game, it's even fighting multiple Blights, and the challenge here is so much more worthwhile than in Breath of the Wild, where I was so overpowered that I had to pace the battle on purpose just to make it seem longer. Now, on top of that, once you beat the Blights and save the champions, this time you're actually able to pilot the divine beasts and just roam around tearing shit up. As I said, the whole quest of Breath of the Wild is freeing the divine beasts just so they can shoot one laser beam, which all four together only take half of Ganon's strength, which you don't even have to do at all, while you finish the job with a Boko bat if you want. The only thing that really diverts this story from the story of the future is that they know the date Ganon will return. Monsters amassing together to invade and things are getting more dangerous, so this is actually a war, and murking thousands of monsters at once with an airstrike is as war as it gets, as well as cutting through them on the ground in person. I've seen people complain that the characters are too strong in this game, but I'm just not buying it. The weak enemies are weak, but Lionels, Guardians, Hinoxes still take a bit of work to beat, and in Breath of the Wild, there's actually a memory of the aftermath of this war, and I remember looking at that and being like, damn, how'd he kill all these Lionels? Here, you're living out these battles all over the land, and by the end of a map, if the corpses didn't disappear, it actually looked like it did in that memory. And because it's a war, you really feel like you're freeing the different areas and saving people from the war. The fact that this game is pre-Calamity gives it a charm that a lot of Zeldas have, even if you can't see it with your own eyes. Yes, there's a war, but we're still saving people, freeing villages from hordes of enemies, and making those places stronger. In Zelda games, there's always some peace in the chaos. Some place where you can just do side things and people are happy. In this game, I don't get to go explore towns, but I know they're there. You don't gotta do it, but I actually read most of the text for my character upgrades, just because I found the pre-Calamity stories interesting. When I run around some of the battlefields in this game that haven't been destroyed yet, I'm like, damn, I wish I could just come to this place on the side without the battling going on. Damn, I wish I could just go run around A, B, or C with it peaceful, even in the looming threat. Running around this huge maze-like town is what I always felt Breath of the Wild was missing. I don't give a shit about exploring Hyrule if there's nothing in it. This game gives me a vast, deep, lively world that I wish I had in Breath of the Wild, and even though I can't see it all the way I want to, it feels like a Zelda world. It feels like the small maps of the past, but stretched out to be 10 times bigger. The world is interesting, and so is the story, and it all sums up to me getting the type of wild action I look for in a climatic ending. You know how in a good movie there's always multiple fights going on at once? Basically, this is all Hyrule united. There was so much going on at once, I can't even explain how lit the scenario was the first time I played it. All the story build-up really came to a spectacular payoff, and all the different characters and races I interacted with throughout the game came together for this one moment. All these text scrolls that I didn't have to read actually seemed like they amounted to something when the whole kingdom came together to fight the enemy. It was like Endgame meets Zelda. Now, as many good characters as there were to play, I usually kept the same three, Link, Zelda, and Impa, for the main story points, because I wanted the story to be a concrete, enjoyable experience, and that's exactly what it was, and it usually made the most sense with them. Of course, I would switch it up and mix the champions in as well. Just doing a battle alongside them made them feel much more relevant, instead of them just being side stories to build up how Link is the strongest. So seeing all of them on the map all through different parts of the game, whether I was playing them or not, made them all the more memorable and important this time around. That feeling was supported by the vast amount of cutscenes, some of my favorite I've seen in a game. These really pull everyone together to where even the douchebag character looks heroic when he's not being, a douchebag. There's only a few characters that are more obvious just game fill, including Ganon himself, but the story mostly makes sense of all these playable characters and gives much more attention to existing characters too. The cutscenes really took it the extra mile, and to me made parts even better from the original. Watching Zelda awaken her power in Breath of the Wild was pretty cool and sort of emotional, but it's kinda hard to care if it's too little too late and she doesn't look so heroic finally achieving what she struggled to do her whole life if it finally happens after everyone in the kingdom is dead, including the actual hero himself. That whole scene was hardly as good as seeing Link fight all 4 blights at the same time to protect his friends, and this time, Zelda's shortcomings still exist, but while her need to awaken her power was pushed to the breaking point, this time it happened right at the right time. Now there is a few holes in this game, which is fine because nothing's perfect. As much as I like the character interactions and the cutscenes, I found it annoying how gung-ho Nintendo has gotten with the whole Link being a mute thing. With such sophisticated and intelligent characters in this game with their own dialogue and voice acting, it really makes Link just look like a dumb caveman who swings sword good, the way he just grunts and makes strange noises or nods at everything like an idiot all through the game. In games with no voice acting, Link was always a total Chad, the strong silent type, but in this game it really just shines a different light on his refusal to speak a word ever. It makes him look like a dumb meathead who no woman, fish, or shadow beast would ever want to take home if he was the last guy in the milk bar at midnight, let alone to ever have the princess of the kingdom fall in love with him over and over again. Aside from that, some characters have annoying things to them. Koga getting stuck in a hole and stopping to eat bananas mid-fight was annoying. Riju was hard as hell to control, making me just not play her really. And to be honest, I know she's strong, but does anybody really like playing the Great Fairy ever? She's too fucking big to fit anywhere and just really goofy as a character. Seeing her in a cutscene would honestly take me right out of the immersion. The weapon upgrade system was pretty fun, but still kinda confusing even after I watched tutorials on it. That's more of a nitpick though, and not a complaint, since it's the exact thing I said I wanted Breath of the Wild 2 to have. And then I have a personal grudge with timed scenarios. I'm a completionist. I like to kill every enemy, find every treasure, and do everything in a scenario. There's a few stages that were really a pain in the ass because they had a time limit, and even some main missions where I couldn't kill all the enemies I wanted because I had to go save some weak-ass Hyrule captain or something. There's also the hair with child expert that pissed me off so much that I wanted to cut the game off and throw it in the trash. If anybody has played it, you have to have hated that one as much as I did. Lastly, as expected in typical Nintendo fashion, there's some lag here and there, frame rate really goes to shit sometimes, slow appearing textures, and even enemies standing dead still not attacking or being harmed when I attack them, with attacks sometimes just not registering at all. The camera angles get wonky in tight corners sometimes, but to be honest, I'm surprised the Switch can play this game so well with so much going on. And then seriously, why is Rivali so much more of a dick in this game? Also, as I said, I like the fighting and I also like a good challenge, but the difficulty is dispersed kinda odd if you ask me. Some of the main story parts were jaw easy, while side quests would be dumb hard. Some of them weren't even that hard for real, but I'd still need multiple restarts in places where it doesn't seem I would. His random fight with Rivali seemed like it just went on and on and on. I think his health bar was as long as Calamity Ganon's. A lot of the strategy in boss fights, although it adds more variety as well as planning, it left me really just standing for long periods of time waiting for the enemy to do something, which was especially annoying on maps with a time limit. But I'll take this fight quality where I have to think over this any day. In conclusion, I'm not the type to give a game a 1 to 10 rating, but I like this game enough where I actually played it again and would probably do so again and again, even just to go through the story more times. I kinda wanted to play it again right after finishing it, but I decided to wait a while. This was my first Hyrule Warriors game, and although I'm not too interested in playing the first one, I really enjoyed this one. And on a scale of 1 to lit, I rate this game as fuck. If you're not a nitpicking simp, I definitely recommend you go and buy it. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Do you agree? Or am I just a lame who has no business reviewing anything ever? Let me know. And as always, if you want me to do more videos in the future, comment, like, and subscribe. That way to inspire me to do more of these more often.
I won't fail. I won't stand for it. I must not fail. You're not going to like this. No time to lose. This one some feathers. That did the trick. I won't fail you. I won't stand for it. I must not fail. Yunobo, you got this. You're not going to like this. No time to look. This one some feathers. That did the trick.